Hey, welcome back to On the Sensors. Today we have another deck tech for you, and we have a special guest today. We have Dragonz from our On the Sensors Discord, who has a deck tech he wanted to share with us today. Hello, Dragonz. How are you?
Hello, good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. You brought us this deck, and you said, "Man, this is a really cool deck. I really enjoy playing it," and you wanted to share it with everybody, and we welcome you for it. So, I've got the character lineup at least up here. Why don't you tell us kind of what we're looking at?
Well, first, before we go into the characters, briefly, I want to go over the plot because the plot
Sure.
is the key to the characters, to everything that we've put into this deck. So,
Mm-hmm.
advanced training. You may resolve your trooper dice showing a blank as if they were indirect that have a value of 1. Okay.
Yes.
So then let's move forward kind of with what the characters that are going to assist us with getting that done. Now, we have 2 Imperial Death Troopers and we have a shapeshifter.
And you're
So
running the Imperial Death Troopers at Elite, correct?
correct. So those are going to be at 11, and then we got the Clawdite shapeshifter at 6, and advanced training at 2 to
Mm-hmm.
make 30. Right. So if you look at the Imperial Death Trooper, something a lot of people like to do is they have 50% damage. So a lot of people like to throw them in the deck just to get some good base damage out there as soon as they can.
Sure.
Right. Their PAs, their power actions allow them to manipulate their die to the same value and symbol of another die that's showing on your board.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like I said, a lot of people like to use it for their ranged damage ability. But you know what, I think they're just too good to that generates money to not use that and take advantage of their money driven die. I mean, so that's we're gonna take a look at a closer look at that as we move along. But keep in mind the dollar signs that we got going on with the trooper. All right,
It's always
'cause they're
about the
good.
money.
They're always about the money. So Claudite, I mean, the troopers are relatively self-explanatory. They don't do too much. Claudite, now that's the tricky one here in this deck. You can, when you activate her, you can turn her into any subtype right after you activate her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be either using her as a trooper or you're going to be using her as a leader. So keep that in mind as we move along to some of the supports and some of the cards we have.
Leader. All right, I see where we're going.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it for the characters.
Okay. Well, so I mean, you talk about 50% damage sides on the Imperial Death Troopers, but you're kind of using them for their money. So
Right.
money plays an important part in this deck. So let's look at what you're using that money for. So it looks like in this deck you're running, in terms of money, you're running 2 copies of Tech Team, right? If you're looking to make money, Tech Team is obviously good in a support-based deck that you can just repeat over and over again. Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
But you're running a Trooper money deck, so what better than some couple of conscript squads?
Right. So something that's interesting about these is after you activate a leader, you may activate the support.
Mm.
You activate Claudite as a leader, you may activate, if you have both of those out conveniently, you can go ahead and throw them in at the same time. So I mean that's just going to be one aspect that you're going to take a look at right there. But those have more value than I think a lot of people give them credit for.
Supports as upgrades, ones that stick around even if your characters leave.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
well, speaking of troopers in a trooper deck, a card that I really like, and I don't think it gets enough play either, is you include 2 copies of Sniper Team. 2
Right.
costs.
They're 2 cost. They're relatively cheap. They have some. It's a low key power hitter. I mean, if you look at the size of that die, consistent 4 out of 6, I believe, is damage.
Well, with
Look
advanced
at that
train
a little
with
close.
it with advanced training, all 6 because they're troopers, right? So yeah, so
Correct.
they're running a 1 gun, a 2 gun, a 3 guns for $1, 4 guns for $2, a blank blank. But
That's
with
fantastic.
advanced training, I mean the blanks are still indirect damage. So you're looking at 6 damage sides per die. So it's really
So,
really
and
good.
also the way you look at it is, let's pretend those blanks didn't exist and they were 1 indirect damage.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't everyone want that card in their deck?
Oh yeah, for
Like,
sure.
that would be an insane die if you didn't need a plot and you had 1, 2, 3, 4 range and then 2, 1 indirects. Like that is just, you know, and that's something I never see people use advanced training. I've never seen a deck with it, and I just think that in one of the last rotations, there's so many good trooper supports out there, and yeah, there's blanks, and that's why people don't play them as much. Because if you get caught on that blank,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're not going to get anything done, and then you're waste of a turn or waste of a round. So yeah, so let's keep going. But sniper team is low key one of the power hitters in this deck.
And that 2 money on that 4 range is kind of steep, but you're talking about making money anyway with IDTs, so
Right.
paying two to resolve 4s is pretty good. So
Yeah.
two other cards that I like in this deck that I don't think get enough play either. They're not technically troopers, but they interact with troopers. You run 2 copies of ATRT.
Right. So there's only going to be a couple cards in this entire deck with blanks that you technically cannot resolve.
Mm-hmm.
ATRT is a vehicle support. It is not a trooper, so you cannot resolve the blank as one interact. However, there's only one blank on it. It's a $2. There is, if you look at it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna pull it up right now. It's a +1, +1, +2, +2, and then a +3 for 1. So +2, +2, +3 for 1. That is 50% chance of adding at least 2 to the value of whatever trooper die you want to do. Now,
Right.
something that's so cool about it is because you can resolve trooper blanks as indirect, you can add that +2 to a blank. So that becomes
Right.
3. So this is not, so even if you have other blanks out there like, well, I can't +2 a blank. Yes, you can. You can do that.
Because
There's so much value. Exactly. So
you're resolving it as if it hasn't, as if it's showing indirect, even though it's
correct.
showing a blank, it's changing at the time of resolution. Yep.
Right. And even if you get that in the beginning because of Death Troopers PAs, there's a good chance you're going to be able to at least get one resource out there. And then if you get ATRT in the first round, I mean, you can use them. It's very versatile, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
you could use it just to make more money in the beginning if if you want to start ramping up as fast as you can. So very versatile card, ATRT, and yeah, low key one of my favorite cards in the deck.
I mean, we spend 0 money on a Reap to flip like a Jabba to a 1 and a +2. You got this out there who can do more than just flip to money late in a game. You can flip it to +2 damage. I think it's a great card. It's a great addition, and I think it's a great inclusion in this deck.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so then, along with the AT-AT, something that also you could play, you could actually use the 8 resolution of AT-AT with your sniper teams, right? You could use it with conscript squads. You could even use it with your 2 copies of Mega Blasters that you put in this deck.
Right. Right. So, and then their little keyword special below is, after you activate this spot a leader, and you may roll 1 extra FOSS die into, your
Mm-hmm.
out there on your board. So that's where Clawdite could once again come in handy, right? You are using a turn ahead of time, an action to make her a leader,
Sure.
but you know, and that's what's so interesting is when you're facing this deck, you're not quite sure who to attack first. Is Clawdite important? Which is not bad. If you can, something I've noticed, if you can start using Clawdite as a leader early, that's the focus, and that's okay if she dies first. She's the weakest. She doesn't have a PA. So that also is kind of like, it's almost like a distraction for the
Yeah.
opponent. It's like, oh man, I know that the Imperial troopers are just better in every way, but I feel like I have to kill the Clawdite now. So,
Well,
and I mean, Mega troopers are just so good.
they are.
Yeah.
I mean, four money for basically no blank dice, 3 dice is ridiculous. But
Right.
I mean, you're right though, right? That people see Clawdite and they think, okay, she's gonna turn in whatever. And the first time you turn her into a leader, they're gonna probably pick up on the fact that you have megas or you have other leader centric cards in your deck. So you did something
Yeah.
smart, and for 2 resources, you're also including 2 copies of Imperial Officer, right?
Right. And you can spot them just like a character. So you got your conscript squad, right? That's
Hmm.
going to pair up with the Imperial officer. You have the Mega Blasters that's going to pair up with the Imperial officers. And then, Imperial officers as well as after you activate the support, you may turn one of your trooper die to any side. This is a very fast ramping deck. Very fast. Um, I can easily have 4, maybe 5 supports in the second round, maybe
Whew.
more. So when you get the leader out rather early, you're okay with Clawdite going down, you know.
Right.
And it's just you get it's such a good benefit. I mean, that die again. This is one of 2 cards. The AT/RT and Imperial Officer do have a blank you can never resolve.
Right.
But
Right.
that's it though. It's you need a leader out there. You know, it just makes so much stuff happen. You get it's an automatic focus, and then you get 2 sides on the die as focus.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room to start not only just getting a lot of die out there, but manipulating your die to the sides you need.
It's really really good. Um.
Yeah.
So this is how you're gonna win the game, right? Like, you put some contingencies in with Imperial Officer, in case Clawdite goes down, but I mean, to be fair, you've got 2 9 health characters and a 6 health character. In this day and age, in this meta, like, that could be spiked off the table. So
Right.
you obviously gotta play some cards to keep them alive. And what better in a trooper deck than a couple copies of Riot Shield, right? Like, almost an auto
Yeah.
included.
Yeah, and and I've played games that I haven't pulled them, and I've still won most of those games,
Nice.
without the riot shield. But you get that early. Again, everything's so versatile. You can even put it on Clawdite, and before she takes damage, activate her and make her a trooper if you need.
Yep.
So there's just, I mean, those shields are such a nuisance for opponents. 3 damage for $1.
Yeah, it's
You're
really good.
saving yourself. That's really good,
It's really good. Trooper decks also usually include, and so do you, a couple copies of Measure for Measure.
right?
Might as well trade a blank that could be one indirect for to get rid of like a 3 sticks or something. It's probably
Right.
no
And you're
brainer.
going to have a lot of blanks out there. So, those blanks are technically indirect, one indirect, but it's a good trade-off.
Yeah. You are running all troopers, so near miss, great inclusion. Everyone's sharing a subtype, and Clawdite can be whatever you need it to be. So even if an IDT goes down, you can still have a couple of troopers.
Correct. Yep,
So
I've played it that way many times. Yep.
so we're looking at 2 dice with both Imperials, Death Troopers, and a single on Clawdite. So you're starting with 5 die start. Mega
Mhm.
Blasters brings 3 apiece, right? So you've got to have a lot of dice probably out on the table. So you include a couple copies of Route. 6 dice in the pool, 1 money, remove 2 dice. Seems pretty good.
Yeah, especially it's one of those things that, Mega Blasters, if you have those on hand and you have a leader,
Mm-hmm.
that's automatic 3 die right there,
Oh, right, yeah.
right? So therefore, you can already use it if it's one of those games that you're like, I need to throw die out there to use this route. This deck allows that to happen.
Imperial Officer with 2 conscript squads on the table. That will
And
do
there
it.
you go. That'll do it.
Yeah. Along with the whole everybody shares a subtype, you also include 2 copies of Power of the Tribe, which is an excellent card out of FA. Or out of
Yeah,
Redemption.
yeah. It's definitely one of the better um, die removals for cost 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only thing is, I mean, if you look at it right, all characters on your team share a subtype. So Clawdite in that situation, you just have to be aware on what cards you're going to have. Is Clawdite going to be a leader that round or a trooper that round? Usually a trooper, but you will have to make sure that she's a trooper before you use this card. But yeah, that's just a good mitigation card.
Well, and if she's gone, right, then you can still use it if you have 2 IDTs still out there.
Correct. Oh yeah.
So, all right, well, we know how you're going to win the game, and we know the package to try to keep your guys alive. The next set of cards that you have included, the last set, I consider them some utility. I think they're great utility cards. They fit the mold depending on who you're playing and what you need to do. And you start with 2 copies of Small Battles 1.
Right. I mean, and this is another card that's very versatile as well. I mean, it's 0 cost. Resolve one of your red dice showing a value of 1
Mm-hmm.
without removing it from your pool. Um, I typically use this for money in the beginning, but I mean, at the end of games, I've had 2 in my hand, and I've had a 1 range, and I'll just keep tapping that 1 range with small battles 1 damage here next turn, one more damage next turn, resolve the die for 1 more damage. So it just depends on how late in the game or how early in the game you get small battles 1. It's how you're going to use it. usually money in the beginning and then damage later or what have you. But yeah, 0 cost event. Love it.
It's good. You also include 2 copies of Squad Tactics. I mean, and I understand why. Like everybody's non-unique, right? I'm assuming you put this in there. I mean, you're running military camp, but if you don't get military camp, or maybe if you don't have the battlefield at the time, this card's probably pretty clutch, right?
Oh, 1000%. You know what? Even if I have military camp and it saves yourself an action to just be able to activate 1 extra character. So
True,
small
true.
battles 1, or not, squad tactics, sorry. Activate any number of your non-unique characters at once. So
Mm.
what you're referring to is military camp. Maybe we should pull that battlefield up and just talk about that for a quick moment.
Sure.
Battlefield. Activate up to 2 of your characters that share a subtype. So you would be activating both of the troopers and then
Sure.
re-roll 1 die if if one of those is a trooper. So that is to segue back to squad tactics. They relatively do the same thing. One allows you to re-roll a die. One allows you to activate all of your characters. I don't think one's better than the other. It's just kind of like one of those things of it puts pressure on the opponent immediately.
Right.
You have 5 die out there and they have to worry about all of that, and then they start spending money on mitigation and removing die. So
Start them.
and it's not used that often, and I just think it's fun to use cards that aren't everywhere. So
I think it's good starting them your opponent off on the back foot because you're right. 5 dice in the pool. While they may not be the most damaging dice like early game, it gets your game plan started super quick, right? Because you
correct.
resolve 4 money essentially, possibly.
Oh yeah.
So, you 2 copies of one of my favorite cards to come out of the old FFG meta. 2 copies of Probe. I love this card, and you're gonna yell at me because I always probe incorrectly. Uh,
Oh, do you? Well, tell me how you probe.
I play with a couple of guys here locally, and I always probe the guy right off the top. 5 cards in
Mm,
hand. I don't care. I want to see what you're looking at. I want to see what you're working with, even if I don't grab events.
right,
Although
right.
luckily for me, I always ended up grabbing 2 events every time I did it.
There you go. Um, so and that there is no right or wrong. I look at everything mathematically and
Right.
percentage wise and value and uh, what are the chances of this happening or what's in my favor. So typically what you're going to do is think about you yourself when you start out a game, you're going to want if an upgrade, support, some other things, some downgrades depending on your deck. Usually you don't want 5 events in your hand. That's just I can't think of a deck besides maybe a mill deck that you would want 5 events to start off. You
True.
don't.
Right.
That's very rare to happen, right? You're gonna try to get 5 new cards and hopefully get a supporter upgrade. So I usually wait a turn or two, sometimes 2 turns. So they place their merchant, they place their it binds all things, they place all of their ramp up, the ramp
Mm-hmm.
up cards, right? Let them get rid of those so they're left with just a couple events. That's just how I go about it. There is no right or wrong because I can't say my way is right because I can't predict what they have in their hands.
I
I have
mean,
no idea.
it makes sense, right? It makes sense. You want to try to maximize the value of probe, and to maximize it, you're looking at discarding 2 cards from their hand, whether those are events or money makers or whatever, right?
Right.
So you're right. Mathematically, it makes sense to give it a turn or two, and then get those cards out of their hand that they're either going to use for rerolls or to mitigate your dice. So
Also, if you think about it, the first round is relatively important. There's a handful of people that will discard cards in the first round to re-roll to
mm-hmm.
get that resource out or get that early damage out, and you're removing 2 cards now that they weren't counting on not having. So less re-rolls for them.
So the last 2 cards that you have, I really like too because you're playing 2 red characters. Clawdite's not a red character, but you're playing a couple of red characters. So you play 2 copies of Planned Operation.
Right. This is basically more or less the purpose of Riot Shield is just, heal. A lot of people like to use it if they have 3 red characters across the board. You don't in this, so you're only going to take advantage of 2 of the 3 things that it's going to allow you to do: heal 2 damage from a character, spot 2 red characters, turn a die to any side.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't use this for manipulating my die. I use it for manipulating and mitigating the opponent's die.
A little soft
Um,
mitigation, yeah.
it's a soft mitigation and it's a heal at this exact same time. So because this deck is so dice heavy and there's so much dice out there, you already have cards that are, you have Imperial officers to rotate, you have your PAs on your Imperial Death Troopers to rotate already. This card really it should be used in this deck anyways for soft mitigations
It makes
and
sense. It makes
healing
sense.
up. Yeah.
And 2 heal for 2 money, like you're basically salt flatting a non-leader die and healing 2. Like that's huge, especially if you're staring down maybe 2 sticks or 2 guns or something. That's a possible 4 damage swing that you're adjusting on your side, which is good.
Right, right. So I mean, and if you look at mitigation now with this, you're looking at maybe 12 mitigation cards, 12 die removal,
Sure.
soft die, hard die removals, which is about standard. You want typically maybe 8 to 12, depending on your deck, maybe around 10. So, red, there's not too many events that you can go with. You're a little bit capped off. There are a couple events that we talked about before that maybe we could have thrown in here. But I would rather heal myself and do a soft mitigation than just straight up do damage to myself to remove a die.
Yeah, I agree. I like it, man. This looks like a really fun deck. I mean, obviously I have it sleeved together, so I might have to play this against Maju and some of the other guys on the server. This looks really fun. I like the quick, fast money. Red villain. I kind of have a heart for, so it looks good, man.
Yeah, and the supports are so fun. I love playing it because I love being surprised on how I'm gonna go about it. Every game's a little different with this deck. It's not, it's not Vader and Savage where it's like I'm just gonna be strong.
Right.
It's
I'm
no
just.
offense to those decks.
I'm just not gonna slap you in the face with a bunch of sticks the entire time.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to use your brain a little bit. Start realizing what you have in your hand and adapt. Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, Dragonz, I appreciate you coming on and sharing the deck with us. Anything else you want to, little final thoughts or anything you want to say about it before we wrap up?
Not real. I mean, I appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to kind of share a deck that I've taken a while to put together. I'm proud of it. I win most of the time with it, and even when I lose, it's still a great time. If you want to see this deck in action, Dice Commando, Andrew and I played within the last week. So there's a couple matches that we played. So if you kind of want to see this, how you would go about playing this deck or what it looks like when you play against someone who actually knows what they're doing. One video I won one, and then the next video I lost, but both very close. So I don't know if you want to put a link below, but yeah, you can always check those out.
Sure. We'll put a link in there for those videos so you can check it out, and we'll have to get you on, play some physicals with us with this deck, and we'll see how it runs.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this deck today, Dragonz. Thanks for coming on and showing it off to us, and we will see you guys in the next one. Later.